Tidbits from TNT, Sunday morning, the 8th of September 2024. Listen to the full version on the official dinarreport.com website and become our supporter on Patreon. TNT. Tishwash. Opportunities in Iraq. After overcoming years of turmoil at an international conference in Washington, the American Atlantic Council Institute announced that it will organize a conference on Iraq in Washington on October 15. With the participation of current and former politicians and experts from the United States and Iraq, where it will address opportunities and challenges in relations, overcoming years of turmoil, with a focus on the energy sector, and diversifying the Iraqi economy. According to the American Institute, the conference, which is being held within the framework of the Iraq Initiative, under the title, The Path to Recovery, Development and Global Partnerships in Iraq, will bring together a diverse group of senior experts, researchers and policymakers from both the United States and Iraq, including current and former senior officials. The report, translated by Shafaq News Agency, explained that the conference, the third of its kind for the Iraq Initiative, will address the major challenges and opportunities facing Iraq as it begins to overcome years of volatility, with early signs of recovery and development. The report added that the conference will focus this year on the advancement of the energy sector, the efforts of the Iraqi government towards sustainable economic diversification, and the evolving path of the U.S.-Iraqi relationship. The report added that the conference will witness dynamic discussion panels that explore how Iraq, the United States and the international community can interact positively with Iraq as it moves through its unique social, political, economic and security changes. The report added that the conference will witness direct personal participation in via video, and will include translation into Kurdish and Arabic. The report concluded by saying that the Iraq Initiative program provides transatlantic and regional policymakers with unique insights and analyses on the ongoing challenges and opportunities facing Iraq as the country attempts to establish an inclusive political system, attract economic investment, and stimulate a vibrant civil society. Tishwash. Government advisor. We are working on developing a tax system that is attractive to investors. The head of the Supreme Committee for Tax Reform, the Prime Minister's advisor for economic affairs, Abdul Hussein al-Anbaki, announced today, Sunday, a three-pronged plan for tax reform, while he indicated that facilitating measures would be taken regarding the tax administration. He confirmed that previous fines would be exempted for many groups to restore the confidence of taxpayers in paying taxes. Al-Anbaki said in an interview with the Iraqi news agency, which was followed by Al-Iqtisad News, that some media outlets interpreted the tax reform as aiming to increase non-oil revenues. And this interpretation is not scientifically sound, indicating that the main goal of the tax reform is to create an easy and transparent tax system that is friendly to the business environment and attractive to investors. Because the tax rate is not the basis, but rather the tax rate when multiplied by the tax base is the result of the tax revenue. He continued, we seek in tax reform to have a large tax base, explaining that, when the tax base is large, tax revenue will inevitably increase, even if tax rates are the same and at lower rates. He added that, tax revenue is a byproduct of the tax reform situation and not the basis for which the tax reform is launched, noting that, the Supreme Committee for Tax Reform wants to achieve tax justice and make tax accounting easy and transparent and does not want there to be cases of extortion, obstruction and delay of tax procedures. He pointed out that, many facilities have been made, which ultimately lead to restoring the confidence of taxpayers in paying taxes in the tax administration, indicating that, many categories have been exempted, the cases of allowances have been expanded, and they have been exempted from previous fines and accumulated interest in order to restore the confidence of taxpayers in the tax administration. He said, when taxpayers come to account, this will lead to an increase in tax revenues, stressing that, the aim of these measures is to create a tax system that is attractive to investors, and not just to seek to increase tax revenues because increasing tax revenues is a foregone conclusion. Tishwash. Central Bank of Iraq announces comprehensive banking reform map. After the central bank delegation returned from the last round of negotiations with the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. Federal Reserve, It revealed the roadmap for radical and comprehensive banking reform, which begins with working to cancel the electronic platform for foreign transfers, which was implemented as a first stage to reorganize financial transfers in a way that ensures proactive control over them instead of subsequent control. This was a temporary exceptional measure, and a gradual shift was planned towards building direct relationships between banks in Iraq and foreign correspondent and approved banks, mediated by an international auditing company to conduct pre-audit of transfers before they are executed by correspondent banks. During the year 2024, up until now, 95% of the transfer process from the electronic platform to the correspondent banking mechanism directly between it and Iraqi banks has been achieved. This means that only about 5% of it remains within the platform, which will be transferred using the same mechanism before the end of this year, according to the plan. Thus, some expectations about possible effects on the exchange rate and transfer operations are baseless, because the process will not be sudden or in one go at the end of this year. But rather it was originally achieved during the past period with effort and careful follow-up, except for the remaining small percentage that will be accomplished in the coming short period. The central bank confirms that trade with the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, India and China represents about 70% of Iraq's foreign trade as imports, which prompted the Central Bank of Iraq to find channels for transfer in euros, Chinese yuan, Indian rupees and UAE dirhams, through approved correspondent banks in those countries. 13 Iraqi banks have actually begun to conduct transfer operations with a pre-audit mechanism that has been agreed upon and approved in addition to transfers in dollars, providing channels for personal transfers for legitimate purposes and external purchases through electronic payment channels, global money transfer companies, cash sales to travelers, and paying cash dollars for incoming transfers to the parties and purposes specified in the central bank's published instructions. The central bank stresses that it has placed foreign transfer operations and meeting dollar demands on sound tracks consistent with international practices and standards and the anti-money laundering and terrorist financing law. He explains that providing the aforementioned channels for all purposes at the official dollar price makes this price the true indicator of economic practices, which is proven by the reality of price stability and control of inflation, and any other price traded outside those channels is an abnormal price that those with unorthodox or illegal practices resort to, who move away from official channels in their dealings, so they bear the additional costs alone by purchasing at a higher price than the official price to delude others with the difference between the official price and others. The map and mechanisms announced by the central bank will certainly lead to lifting the confusion and instability in the monetary market, which is prevalent due to the continued imposition of American restrictions on our private banks, and directing accusations, slander, rumors, analyses, interpretations and targeting of the central bank, and will create a state of optimism by lifting the restrictions imposed on some private banks. This means that there are great efforts made by the central bank, in cooperation with the government, since the beginning of 2023 until now, in the field of implementing the financial and banking reform program and fruitful coordination with financial policy, which refutes the slander and the accusations and spreading optimism and reassuring the market and citizens. This is what the governor of the central bank had previously emphasized before the central bank delegation's recent trip to America. And the new reform roadmap is a result of the efforts previously made, in which the central bank has been working on for a year and 8 months, and it is as follows. Reorganizing foreign trade financing to achieve several objectives at once, one of which is the transparency of foreign transfer operations that begin with the transfer process and the transfer to the final beneficiary and to the source through all data, documents and information that enhance and match reality. All large and medium-sized companies are committed to achieving this goal. The problem now is the dealings of small traders outside the operations. Foreign transfers are a pressure on the dollar money market and cause it to rise. The central bank opened channels for the Chinese, Turkish, Indian and Emirati currencies, which are currencies that represent a significant weight in foreign trade, as there was a halt for a period due to a new regulation aimed at providing sufficient control over these operations. A new audit mechanism has been put in place by an international company, and the process has been finalized and is now being restarted. The central bank has continuously urged the opening of relations with correspondent banks. Because the Iraqi bank without having external correspondence is considered a local bank and cannot open up to the world. The central bank, for its part, supports and assists this trend. In light of the new regulation of the foreign exchange process, the real price at which the central bank sells more than $250 million daily at the official price should be considered. This means that the bank covers foreign trade, and this explains why there is no inflation or price increases. The parallel market is a market for those who do not want to go towards the regular methods of transfer. And it is an illegal trade or trade that escapes the regular procedures or other illegal operations such as drug trafficking, human trafficking, corruption money, etc. Whether the dollar price rose or fell is not a correct indicator, as one must look at what and how much the central bank sells at the official price to liquidate various needs. The primary objective of the central bank is to maintain the general level of prices and limit inflation, and this is supposed to be the measure of the success of monetary policy, which has succeeded in controlling this aspect and the level of inflation compared to other countries. And even in previous years is much lower, and within the target, and this means that foreign trade, on which Iraq depends primarily to meet the needs of citizens, is covered by the official price. There is great praise in all meetings with international organizations, including the International Monetary Fund, the Federal Reserve, and the U.S. Treasury for the transformations, management, and organization of the external transfer process in the Central Bank of Iraq at the present time. And that, the central bank's plan until the end of the year will reach 100%, with foreign transfers between Iraqi banks and correspondent banks, without going through the U.S. Federal Reserve. The plan to reform and lift restrictions on banks includes two axes. The first relates to conducting an audit of previous operations that were suspected by an independent external audit office, some of which have been completed, while we await the completion of the audit of others in order to determine the overall picture and classify the nature of these problems and how procedures will be carried out regarding them later, and to reach a real, stable banking sector that is consistent with what is required at the level of the national economy, and to prevent some banks from remaining marginal and not representing a real addition to the Iraqi economy, and to gain external acceptance through agreement on their implementation of international policies, procedures and standards. The central bank has not set a quota for foreign transfers for banks, and they can submit whatever foreign transfer transactions they can attract. The central bank does not interfere in customers' choices, and the banks that carry out this process rely on their capabilities to attract their customers. Listen to the full version on the official dinarreport.com website and become our supporter on Patreon. Source: Dinar Recaps.